Welcome back to Interview App, where we teach you how to use the Amazon leadership principles to land your dream job. We're going to jump right into it this week. Remember that I use these interview segments to demonstrate how candidates can do better in their interviews, so you can learn from how real candidates are doing mock interview prep. This week we have a principal product manager who's targeting a job at Amazon. The leadership principle that we focused on was bias for action. The question I asked was to talk about a time where they had a team over which they had no managerial control, but the team wasn't moving fast enough. So as always, as the interview starts to play out and the candidate is answering the question, I will jump in with feedback, and then at the end we will have the assessment of how the candidate did in this interview. Curious to just talk about a time where you had a team over whom you didn't have direct managerial control, wasn't moving fast enough, right? You needed them to work harder, you needed them to do more. Let's just start with just lay it out. What was the situation and what did you do about it? How'd you get them to move faster for you?
Sure. So this is actually about the time when I decided to make an investment in a live chat experience for Dynamics and Power Platform with two goal again. One, that from a customer perspective, can we reduce their time to resolution by enabling them to connect with an agent when they want? And second, the business goal was that if we were to operate at scale, then one agent can interact with multiple customers at the same time, so that what it would mean is we can increase their throughput. So for the same number of cases, we'll need less number of agents and ultimately reduce cost. So these were the two goals for that. And that's the reason I decided to sort of make an investment like that.
From a starting point, this is actually very, very good setup. We always talk about using the STAR format and that situation task. I like how the candidate has immediately stated, hey, here were the goals. We had multiple of them. Here are the goals. Here's how we were going to evaluate whether or not we were being successful. So it's a really good start.
As part of this project, I was also leading a team. We had to work with almost 3 different engineering teams with maybe 40 plus devs, as well as we had to work with the CSS counterpart, the support team, entire support delivery team, because ultimately it's the agents who would need to interact with the experience that we would build. So the conflict that we had as we were sort of going on to this journey was there was a definite sort of slow progress to your question was in terms of how the support delivery team was making strides. And no matter what we did on the experience side and how we were ready, there was always some sort of a hindrance that was coming from the support delivery team in terms of, oh, we cannot do this in this timeline and we definitely need to wait, or you guys need to do something else on the product side before we can staff our agents on live chat experience. That was like a constant theme across the board in the entire journey. And one of the conflict I have to call out was that the delivery head, he was the worldwide support leader head. He came back and he said that before you can expand the live chat experience, we want the engineering team to make an investment in a robust set of resources for agents. Without that, there is no way we will put our staff on this experience, or we'll continue expanding. And it was largely when I tried to dig deeper why that where that statement was coming from, it was largely from his previous experience, because he had rolled out live chat in multiple organizations outside this company I was working for. And so he had the perception that unless we can solve the problem in live chat, customers won't come back to live chat experience. And I certainly had zero experience in this space, but what I did had working with my team was a lot of user research data and in terms of what are customers actually expecting out of this experience, which was plain and simple, which is if you can give me faster resolution compared to my current way of interacting with agent, which is phone and email, I'm definitely more than willing to keep coming back to live chat as long as it fits my timeline and fits my schedule of the day and everything. So the there was a difference in customer expectation in terms of how he was thinking about it and what we had seen, what our customers were saying. So the way actually we tried to tackle and was obviously.
So before we jump on to the way he tackled it, the action part of his answer, there's a lot of exposition here, almost too much context that it feels, the colloquial term is inside baseball, right? It feels like he's talking a lot about his organization and some of the challenges inside the organization and some of the issues with one of the key leaders in the organization. And all of that is fine to a point. But you have to remember that when you're having a conversation with an interviewer, they don't work at your company. They don't know all the parties involved. And so they don't need to know everything. They need to know enough, right, to be able to understand the situation, but they don't need to know everything. You don't need to kind of explain it to them as if they need to know all of the things in order to be functional inside of your organization. And so that's where this answer kind of veered a little bit off into the too many words and kind of meandering a bit, not quite getting to the point. So a little bit harder to have a discussion and engage because, again, remember, when you're in an interview, don't bore the interviewer, right? Don't talk so much that they're struggling to keep up or trying to understand, well, is that important and why does this matter? And I don't really understand. Like, they're busy people and they have their own jobs and their own challenges that they're trying to get through every day. So when you kind of meander in your answers and you're not keeping it tight, you don't kind of hook them and keep it going, it becomes very hard for them to follow the answer. And then ultimately they're just going to walk away with not a great feeling about the interview, even though it might have been a great answer or you did great work that you're talking about, but you just didn't present it in a way that was compelling. And therefore they didn't walk away with a great sense of what happened.
See, one, we brought in a lot of customer feedback, as well as we tried to sort of share the details around how typically live chat experience is launched and how we have launched is very different. We have just exposed live chat as just a third medium for agents to connect, customers to connect with agent. Now, instead of phone and email, they have third option. That's it. We are not introducing live chat how typically it is done in even outside of Microsoft, even how it was done in his previous organization. And so that took a lot of convincing to make him believe that it is not that from an engineering team is saying, no, that we don't want to invest in resources and we should not solve cases in live chat, but it is more about what customers are expecting. And so that, that was like a lot of tussle that happened. And this is just one conflict. There were a bunch of other conflicts happened, but ultimately we were able to expand. So,
but before I get to my follow-on question, so there's another thing that I talk about often when I give feedback to candidates is, the reason we use leadership principles to kind of frame the question that you're asked, even if you're not interviewing at Amazon, is to help kind of gate the story that you tell, right? What are you trying to focus on and how does that apply to the role that you're being asked to do, right? And so bias for action is a key leadership principle for any product manager. No matter what company you're interviewing at, you want to show that you have bias for action, right? So another reason that I talk about the importance of leadership principles when framing your answers is it gives you the ability to pivot and demonstrate other leadership principles in the context of the story that you're telling without necessarily answering questions that asked about those leadership principles. So in this example, there's two things that he focused on, the candidate focused on, that kind of talk about additional leadership principles. One, how he was working with this other key leader who was part of the decision chain and who had control of resources that he needed control of. So that's a bit of earns trust there. And then two, he was very focused on the customer experience, right? From his point of view, from their point of view, and kind of putting a full lens on what the customer experience was. So high customer obsession. So from a bias for action answer, he's able to demonstrate a broader set of leadership principle kind of silos or pillars, I guess, that as a leader, especially a product management leader, he's just going to demonstrate that he's going to show up better in an interview than someone who doesn't do these things.
I'm confused. What information did you have that led you to believe that they weren't moving fast enough?
And so that's the question here, where the question was, you had information that a team wasn't moving fast enough, or a team that you didn't have managerial control over wasn't moving fast enough. What'd you do about it? The challenge with this candidate when he started to meander and wander in his answer is he forgot the question. He never directly answered the question. So a lazy interviewer may just kind of gloss over that and kind of go with the meandering answer and maybe kind of wander on to the next kind of follow-on question or generic follow-on question. But a good interviewer and someone who's really paying attention is going to kind of poke you on that and try to bring you back to, hey, I asked you about this. But you might get one or two of those in an interview where they'll kind of gently nudge you back and it's okay. Like, it's an interview, it's a high stress environment, but you don't want to do that too many times because obviously it doesn't present you very well.
Yes. So I think what information I had was one, as I said, that every time, so basically like when we decided in investment on live chat, we had clear, working with them, we had clearly defined many milestones. One milestone was that once we do the pilot, if we get the results, if the results are the KPIs are better than our current support experience. We'll expand to these regions and everything. But every time we reached those milestones, there was always something net new, that hindrance would come in, which would delay our entire sort of a shift that, oh, no, we cannot expand right now because we don't believe that these numbers are not great. And suddenly, and we are not able to solve, let's say, for example, instance I called out, which is we are solving only 17% of the cases on live chat. So I'm pretty sure customers won't come back. So those assumptions and hypotheses, not sort of thinking about what customers are actually asking for, and those discussions always derailed our next milestone that needed to happen, at least the next 2 and 3 milestones. So it was no action as such itself, like, okay, going and putting more resources behind the project to keep making an impact. So it was more of that scenario. So it was very obvious as such.
He still didn't answer the question, right? So he tautologically states every time we got to a milestone, they wouldn't move forward. So yes, they're not moving fast enough. I get that. But he doesn't really support his answer. He says, well, every time we got to a milestone, they said, we don't have this, or I don't believe the data or whatever. But that actually speaks to a process breakdown, that he is the leader who's kind of pushing this from his side, that he had a process breakdown and he wasn't managing it effectively with this other leader, which it could be a not moving fast enough, but could also be speaking to and highlighting process challenges that this specific leader has in terms of how they are working across organizations to get things done. So again, it's now, he was asked the question, then he was asked a follow-up question, both trying to get to an answer, and he still hasn't quite got there yet, which, depending on where you are level-wise in an organization, like if this was a really senior leader, you'd be like, ugh, this is really painful. A more junior person, you'd be like, well, all right, maybe they're just not understanding the question, or they just don't have the experience. It wasn't, they're trying to talk to something and share a story, and it's not quite mapping right. And you give them a bit more leeway, but in this case, he hasn't quite got there yet.
And so what was your highest piece of leverage to get that team to move?
So I actually went through the entire piece of leverage. So the highest was the CVP, which is the corporate vice president. Initially, I started with the data. He got he got a little influenced, and he put in certain resources, but didn't agree with didn't align with our previous expansion plan. So then I brought in the GM of the customer operations team. And ultimately, even when with him also, we were not able to make that progress, ultimately brought in the CVP as well. And there was like a big executive discussion that happened with the worldwide leader, CVP, and my team. Actually me, just because my team was not part of those discussions at least. And then ultimately that resulted in sort of having a firm agreement why it is important for the business and what support team needs to do, what product team needs to do in order to make that happen. So.
Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. The leadership principle was bias fraction. The question was, you have a team that's not moving fast enough, over which you don't have direct managerial control. What was the situation? What'd you do about it? I'm going to get to the candidate's assessment here in a second, and that'll kind of tie this all together. But the candidate really never answered the question in a way that demonstrated bias fraction. He kind of talked around it, and he talked about sort of metrics, but then he didn't name the metrics. He talked about, he said, it's not true. He named the metrics, he said throughput for the CS, but he didn't use numbers. He didn't really talk about improvements. And it was kind of this kind of non-specific answer about, I wanted to roll this thing out and this guy was blocking me. That's basically what it sums up to. And then when I didn't get what I wanted, and this was the final part of his answer, when I didn't get what I wanted, I hit the nuclear button, went straight to the CVP. Yikes. Yikes. So unless the CVP was his boss, and that was his direct kind of next step, that's a big jump there, instead of a different process. So as a just kind of general note, didn't really demonstrate that he had bias fraction to do something to agitate for change that resulted in a better outcome than he was on the path that he was on the path for with a team over which he didn't have direct managerial control. So that's somewhat a challenging answer. Now, that said, the assessment that was read into the room, I would have read into the room for this candidate, was a bit shorter because we ran out of time. But across the interview, the candidate demonstrated L6 level appropriate bias fraction, while the specific answer block did not paint as firm a picture, this specific answer block. There were multiple instances in the interview where it was clear that the candidate was one who had a strong bias fraction. So the short kind of read on that is didn't quite get there, right? Remember, this person was targeting a principal product manager role, which is L7 in Amazon parlance, but that's kind of a later stage, almost pre-executive role, tends to manage teams, probably has manager of managers. And this answer just was, it was, I was working with a guy, I didn't really get there. He, the process kept breaking. Every time we got to a milestone, he wasn't willing to move. And then I got frustrated and I went to my CVP. That's not a great answer for building that trust inside of an organization, showing bias for action, how to make things work. Candidate could have spent more time talking about what specifically the milestones were, and how things got derailed, how he attempted to fix that. Like, okay, well, the first time it happened, it's kind of an aberration. The second time it happens, now you got a problem, and you need to be introspective and say, okay, well, what can I have done better? Right? So maybe you didn't do it, but now he's kind of further along. He's talking about an example in the past. What could he have done better to mitigate that problem and adjust? Or maybe he did do it and just didn't talk about it, which is, yeah, the second time this happened, I realized, oh, okay, well, this guy's not getting me what I want. And so these were the new guardrails that I put in place so that when we got to the next milestone, that we were able to get there. And finally, what didn't come through in any of this was a sense of time, right? What was the time scope here? Did this happen over the course of 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years? I don't know. So it's hard as an interviewer to understand exactly what was the impact here and how kind of wrought were the discussions. How frustrating was this for him, his teams, etc.? What was the impact of the business? And it just, so there was a lot of data missing that would have kind of supplemented this answer, that would have made it a bit better and a more senior level answer and more appropriate for that someone targeting a principal product manager role. But as it presented, it was kind of a more of a lower level, more junior answer. And so ultimately it was kind of not a great showing. But again, as noted, there were other parts in the interview where the candidate had demonstrated bias for action. So at least it came through, and that's the benefit of doing these mock interviews. You get kind of longer ones. And by the way, if you want to sign up for your free interview, you can go to interviewatt.com and sign up for a free mock interview. We also have other tools now available. It's 2022 now, start of the new year, and got a bunch of new information up there for candidates looking to learn more from Interview App. So that's what we've got this week, and we will talk again soon.